Chapter 1031, Hunting Totoro. After leaving the Misty Valley for a distance, Vermilion Bird finally contacted the command center. She immediately reported on the battle situation and the death of White Tiger. There was another long silence in the command center. Everyone was very saddened by the death of White Tiger. The Four Divine Beasts fleet was the highest-level combat force representative in the East Sea region. The death of White Tiger was undoubtedly a huge loss. However, they also knew that death was inevitable. Now, for both forces, there was no reason to lose this battle. Only by obtaining the Source of God could they make up for all their losses. Otherwise, it would be an unimaginable and tragic defeat. First, they had to face the huge losses of their own mutant teams. In fact, they would also have to watch as the other side gained an additional Epsilon-class strong. The combined losses were unimaginable. Situ Xian stood behind Li Tianyang. At a time like this, his best course of action was to say nothing. He also had to try to look as sad as possible. Otherwise, even the slightest hint of relief would give the impression that he was deliberately taunting. There was nothing he could do. Originally, everyone in the East Sea region had thought that the Jiangnan region was only qualified to assist the East Sea region in this operation. After all, judging from their strength, they were indeed a long way behind the East Sea region. But who would have thought that the Lone Wolf, who was initially looked down upon by everyone, and the Chaos, which had no military honor or team spirit, would have given everyone a resounding slap in the face? The achievements he has made alone have surpassed the entire East Sea region's team of mutants. In contrast, the East Sea region has not had any outstanding achievements so far. Instead, they had lost 3 captains in a row, including White Tiger, who had an ability index of 9,600 points. Li Tianyang opened his cracked lips with difficulty. In recent days, even his urine had turned dark yellow, and he was clearly a little angry. He said in a hoarse voice, "On the battlefield, the situation changes rapidly, and casualties are inevitable. But for the moment, it seems that the situation is still under control." As he spoke, he turned his head and looked at Situ Xian. "Minister Situ, can you contact Chaos?" Situ Xian touched his nose and thought to himself, "I've been so quiet, but you still haven't forgotten about me." Chaos has actively disconnected from the command center. He always acts according to his own opinions, and I can't command him either. Li Tianyang placed his right hand behind his back and gripped his left arm tightly. His breathing became heavy, and he said in a firm voice, "But now that the mutants outside are either dead or retreating, he should have gone to Misty Valley by now." Li Tianyang's greatest hope now was that Zhang Yi would appear quickly and go to fight that damned Billy the Kid to the death. As long as Zhang Yi could hold off Billy the Kid, even if he died in battle, at the very least he could deal a heavy blow to Billy the Kid. In this way, their East Sea region would have a huge chance of obtaining the Source of God for the last and most important Seed Azure Dragon, on Star Island. Situ Xian mumbled, "Well, the problem you mentioned wasn't about what he wanted me to do. Nor was it about what had to happen to Zhang Yi. So, we still need to discuss this slowly and carefully and come up with a concrete plan." Situ Xian was not going to fall for Li Tianyang's tricks. Right now, he loved Zhang Yi to death. In his opinion, whether or not the Source of God was obtained was not even the most important thing. The most important thing was that Zhang Yi had to survive. If Zhang Yi survived, the Jiangnan region would have an Epsilon-class strong within a year at most. He had made up his mind. This time, even if he risked being scolded by Zhu Zheng, he would propose to him that the Jiangnan region use its resources to train Zhang Yi to the best of its ability. This battle made him realize even more clearly the importance of a top-notch mutant in large-scale battles after the end of the world. Vermilion Bird was disheartened and determined to withdraw from the battlefield on Star Island and no longer participate in the fight for the Source of God. She stumbled along the way, leaving the Misty Valley and heading in the direction where Black Tortoise was located. Karadu City. This was a place far from the Misty Valley, and at this time, it was already in a period of truce. Because the truly top-notch experts were already near the Misty Valley, Zhang Yi, the Sky Dragon King, the Azure Dragon, and Yasin Canelo. In a spiral valley frozen into a moon-white ice sculpture, a dozen elegant and beautiful figures stood on top of the stepped ice, cautiously surveying their surroundings. This was the Jiangnan region's Rose Squad. A cute female team member with long hair was crouching on the ground, and in front of her stood a cute little moon-colored elf. Judging from its height, it could just jump up and kick her in the knee. But instead of jumping up and kicking her in the knee, it looked at the girl in front of it with a curious expression, blinking its big eyes. The girl was smiling, her cherry lips slightly open, communicating with the elf at a frequency of sound waves that humans could not hear. In a moment, she turned her head and said to the heroic Ling Hufeishue, the captain of the Rose Squad, who had long, ice-blue hair, next to her, "Captain, it says that the big guy is around here somewhere." Ling Hufeishue's good-looking eyebrows suddenly stood up in excitement. "Oh, really? Have you finally found it?" Some people went to the island to find the source of God. Others went for something else. However, it was rare to have a clear goal and a clear idea of what one could achieve. From the very first moment she set foot on the island, Ling Hufeishue had been acutely aware that the source of God was something that had nothing to do with her. She was well aware of the standards of the top experts from the two major powers. With their current strength, her team was simply not qualified to compete with those powerful people. But where there is loss, there is gain. With patience and discovery, there are always unexpected rewards. For example, the source sprites. Among the members of the Rose Squad, there is a female member named Gu Yufei. Her abilities are not particularly strong in combat, but at certain times, she can play a crucial role. Arya, she can communicate with sea spirits. She can naturally communicate with all kinds of living creatures. This cute little gadget is included. Since landing on the island, others have hunted mutants and sought the source of God. Only the Rose Squad has been tirelessly searching for the source spirits. Although these cannot help one break through, they can provide better results than the mutant origin and enhance the power of mutants. Relying on Gu Yufei's abilities, they have already found more than 10 source spirits on the island. As a result, Ling Hufeishue's ability had increased to a value of 9,400 points. However, the further they went, the slower the rate of improvement became. So Ling Hufeishue began to focus on a special existence in the intelligence. That was a being called a giant source spirit, which looked very similar to a Totoro. She believed that it must be a higher-level source spirit, perhaps possessing a function similar to the source of God. If she could obtain it, it would definitely greatly improve her strength. Chapter 1032 Berserker. Ling Hufeishue heard the news about Totoro and immediately walked over. "Where is it?" Gu Yufei tilted her head and continued to communicate with the small pale moon-colored source spirit. After the source spirit babbled for a while, Gu Yufei said, "It said that the big guy isn't always with them. Most of the time, it can be found anywhere. But it really likes source spirits and often appears by their sides, absorbing their energy. When it's satisfied, it'll leave." Ling Hufeishue raised an eyebrow in slight surprise and said, "The big guy will absorb the energy of the little guy? Could it be that they're not the same species?" In fact, not many people really understood the creatures that accompanied the source of God. That thing had only appeared after the end of the world. Currently, the only known region that obtains the source of God is Xinjiang. Nowadays, there have been many kinds of source spirits encountered. That must be a special existence. Anyway, let's catch it first. Then we can study what it really is. Ling Hufeishue waved her hand at Gu Yufei. Gu Yufei's eyes were a little helpless, but she still reached out and caught the source spirit. Although the little creature was an elf turned into a spirit of high-purity energy, it did not have the slightest ability to resist, and was eventually stuffed into a metal round kin by Gu Yufei. Ling Hufeishue looked at the huge spiral-shaped pit in front of her and said, "Capture all the source elves here. Then use them as bait to attract the big guys over. It's been too long, and this island will become more and more dangerous. We'll call it quits after this job." Ling Hufeishue seemed to sense that the atmosphere on the island was not quite right. She knew that once the battle for the source of God truly began, all previous agreements between the two sides would be likely to be torn up. Even mutants of the Epsilon class would personally get involved. By then, the entire island would become a huge battleground. If they stayed, even the ashes of their bodies would be too weak to be used as cannon fodder. Yes. The female team members' voices were clear as they each took out their equipment. Gu Yufei placed her hands on her chest, her lips slightly parted, and from her mouth came a song that was inaudible to the human ear. In no time at all, one after the other, little elves crawled out of the white spiral. The team members immediately pounced on them and put them all into metal jars. Then another group of team members took out various tools and set up traps in the white spiral, waiting for the giant source elf to appear. In order to lure the Totoro over, the Rose Squad adopted a more radical approach. After determining that the area far from Misty Valley was basically free of mutant activity, they used a high-powered signal transmitter to simulate the energy signal of the source spirit and transmit it to the surroundings. Then all the team members ambushed the area around the white spiral, waiting for their prey to take the bait. Less than half a day had passed. A response came from the survey team's detection equipment. Prey, hooked. Lingu Feishua's eyes also filled with excitement, and her right hand immediately pressed on the long sword at her waist. In the distance, the poisonous miasma surged, and a huge object was rapidly approaching from afar. Just as they thought it was the Totoro attracted by the Gen Elf signal, a huge and hideous monster suddenly leapt tens of meters high from the poisonous miasma and smashed down hard onto the deep pit where the white spiral was located. Everyone looked up at the huge figure. However, it was not the giant Gen Elf mentioned in the intelligence. Instead, it was a huge humanoid monster more than 3 meters tall, covered in black and gold armor. What is this? Everyone in the Rose Squad froze. They had not expected such a thing to suddenly appear. But in the blink of an eye, the huge humanoid monster had already fallen like a cannonball at the bottom of the white spiral. Boom! The entire white spiral was shattered, and the earth and stones splashed up like a waterfall flowing back. The strange man stood in the ruins, his huge hand open, but there was only a signal transmitter. A human trap? The weirdo's mouth let out an angry sound. Obviously, he had also been attracted here by the genie's amplified signal. But he never expected to have fallen for someone else's trap. At this time, Lingu Feishua had already communicated the intelligence here with the command center. After receiving the news, the command center immediately began to analyze the images from the scene. The conclusion reached by the intelligence officers made Li Tianyang, Situ Xin, and the others fall silent. Guanghan, the person you encountered was a member of the infernal chain, Berserker Basaka. They were silent because they knew the strength of the Rose Squad very well. If they encountered a member of the infernal chain, the probability of total annihilation was extremely high. Retreat, retreat immediately. Guanghan, he is not an opponent you can handle. Li Tianyang gave the warning at the first opportunity. The Berserker was a special member of the Hell's Chain. He had been perfectly enhanced through human experimentation and was an excellent strengthening mutant with attribute points. His strengthened body could withstand the main gun of a battleship. His only drawback was that once he activated his killing mode, he would lose his mind. Lingu Feishua's pupils contracted. She never imagined that she would encounter a member of the Hell's Chain in such a place. Unsurprisingly, the other party was attracted here by the same means that had attracted the giant Totoro to them. But now, how exactly was this terrible guy going to be dealt with? Run away? Lingu Feishua immediately dismissed that idea. Even if she could escape, she still had so many subordinates, and they would surely die here. It would be better to take advantage of the geographical advantage and fight him to the death. Activate the trap. Lingu Feishua directly gave the order to the team members. Roger. From all directions, the team members pressed the activation devices on their arms. The trap set up to capture Totoro was officially activated. Traps were placed in all directions of the white spiral. Blue energy fibers shot out from the metal boxes, forming a huge energy net that shot across and across towards the furious Basaka. After a moment, Basaka, who was still furious from being tricked, was completely covered by the huge blue net. He looked down at the net on his body, his eyes gradually turning red, and he let out an angry roar as he looked up at the sky. Ah! He used both arms to pull directly at the net on his body, and his muscles bulged up like balloons. Then he suddenly began to exert force, using the brute strength of his body to fight against the high-tech product. The blue energy net was woven from high-purity energy, containing more than 100,000 volts of high-voltage electricity, which could easily cut down a building. But Basaka used his own hands to directly pull and distort the large net, tearing a gap in it. How is this possible? One team member's eyes were wide with disbelief. Is he a monster? Chapter 1033, Powerful Flesh. Ling Hufeishua was the first to react. They must take advantage of the fact that Basaka was still being held back by the energy net and immediately launch an attack. Otherwise, once this monster with only a desire to kill breaks free, the chances of victory for everyone here combined may not even be 30%. Everyone listen, attack. Ling Hufeishua drew her long sword and swung it upwards at an angle. Hearing the voice of their captain, the team members came back to their senses. In an instant, all kinds of weapons began to rain down on Basaka in the depths of the white spiral. Why am I here, meeting a bunch of worms like you? Damn it, this is a complete waste of my time. Basaka roared in pain, his roar growing more and more violent. He exerted a sudden force, tearing the huge energy net to shreds. By this time, Ling Hufeishua had already finished coating everyone. The opponent is a reinforced mutant who is good at close combat, so pay attention to keeping your distance. She herself raised her sword high and leapt towards Basaka. A Midsummer Night's Dream. She opened her lips and let out a shower of colorful bubbles from her mouth, which instantly enveloped the entire white spiral. Each colorful bubble was a high-purity bomb transformed by her supernatural powers. Explosion. The colorful rainbow bombs exploded all over the place like fireworks, completely engulfing Basaka in them. Soon, Basaka's combat suit was riddled with holes. However, it revealed his dark, toned, and even somewhat exaggerated muscles. His muscles looked like they were made of black gold, glowing faintly in the weak sunlight. Ling Hufeishua had by now arrived above him under the cover of the colorful bubbles. A pure white, bright full moon slowly appeared behind her, setting her off like a fairy under the moon, but more like a beautiful and heroic female general. Ling Hufeishua's long sword in her hand elegantly traced an arc in the air. Moon will slash. From within that full moon, a light burst forth like ice and snow. Then one after the other, bright white streaks of light fell from the sky like a crescent moon, like sharp blades, like battle axes slashing at the white spiral around Basaka. At this point, Basaka had been thoroughly angered. He took out a blood-stained silver armored battle axe and glared at the sky. One after the other, the crescent moons fell in front of him, and he swung the battle axe directly at them without any fancy moves, smashing them to pieces one after the other. The explosion of energy filled the entire white spiral. The entire Rose Squad's attacks converged on him alone. Even Basaka could not withstand all the attacks, and there were always some that landed on him. In no time, even his body had a hint of shallow injury. But the blood that flowed out of it made him even more excited. Hey, woman! Those insignificant wounds were fleeting, and they regenerated at a speed visible to the naked eye. Garrett Brent, the Berserker, ability code, Viking War Spirit. The top-level enhanced mutant, with a supernatural ability index of 9,500 points. He possesses almost every perfect ability of an enhanced mutant. For example, super speed regeneration. Barzaka brandished his battle axe and looked at the woman in the colorful bubble floating in the air. He let out a piercing, maniacal laugh, and his legs bent, his powerful thigh muscles looking like two thick steel bars twisted together. Boom! He slammed his feet into the ground, launching himself straight up like a bullet and charging straight at Ling Hufeishua. His speed was simply mind-boggling. Ling Ufeixue was in no doubt about what to do. She opened her mouth and spat out a shower of multicolored bubbles, obscuring Basaka's vision. She herself quickly flew off in another direction. She wasn't stupid enough to engage in close combat with a mutant from the enhanced department. As soon as Barca missed a shot, he was immediately besieged by all members of the Rose Squad. Damn bug! He was covered in more and more wounds, which were not fatal but made him look very disheveled. However, as he was injured more and more, the color of his skin slowly changed from black to red. A more frenzied momentum surged from within his body, and his eyes began to be obscured by a ruthless murderous intent. He looked up at Ling Ufeixue in the sky, his right arm fully extended like a discus thrower, and then he hurled the battle axe in his hand. Ling Ufeixue was ready to dodge. But when the axe came rushing at her, she realized that her reaction was simply unable to avoid the blow. The difference in speed and power was too great, and her eyes could not even capture the trajectory of the axe attack. In a hurry, she could only add 7 layers of coating to her protective armor to block it. Puh! 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 The tough supernatural coating was punctured like a balloon. Ling Ufeixue blocked the attack with her long sword in front of her, and the moment the 7 layers of coating shattered, she was finally able to block Basaka's flying axe. However, the powerful force transmitted to her arm made her arm go numb, and her hand was instantly ripped with severe pain. She didn't need to look to know that her hand holding the sword was already bloody. This was the terror of a mutant with the strengthening system. In close combat, there was almost no mutant of any system that could contend with her. Ling Ufeixue was knocked hundreds of meters before stopping, and was almost knocked out in one blow. And the mechanical flying axe was equipped with an automatic recall device. As Basaka raised his hand, it quickly flew back into Basaka's hand. Ling Ufeixue's heart was shocked. Even the bottom of the members of the Infernal Lock has such terrifying combat effectiveness? Was this the strength of the world's #1 military power? Seeing that Ling Ufeixue was unable to withstand Basaka's attack, her deputy captain, Guan Yu, could no longer sit still. She drew a huge sword and charged directly at Basaka. "Captain, I'll help you." Ling Ufeixue was a little anxious when she saw Guan Yu's move. She had already felt Basaka's strength, which was definitely not something that Guan Yu could match. But at this moment, the only person who could help her contain Basaka head-on was Guan Yu, a mutant of the enhancement system. Good! Ling Ufeixue no longer hesitated, and she and Guan Yu took up positions in front and behind her, launching an offensive against Basaka on their own initiative. Basaka, armed with a Viking battle axe, grinned from ear to ear when he saw the 2 women daring to attack him on their own initiative. Roar! He let out a hearty roar and swung his axe at Guan Yu, who had charged at him first. There were no fancy moves, as a berserker's fighting style could be summed up in 2 words: brutality. The huge axe came crashing down, so fast that you could hear the air burst with the sound of its impact. Guan Yu, holding her huge sword, swung it around and parried the blow. Bing! The sound of metal clashing was heard, and the sword was made of Edmund metal, which was exceptionally tough. That was why Basaka couldn't cut through it. However, Guan Yu's arm was broken directly under the blow. The sword came out of her hand, her arm was shattered, and her hands were twisted and deformed. Basaka's power exceeded her imagination. Meeting a member of the Hell's Lock, for the first time, she finally understood why the entire East Sea region would be filled with awe when they mentioned this name. Chapter 1034, Restraint Through Attributes. Guan Yu had thought that as a reinforced mutant with an 8,000-point supernatural ability index, she could at least hold Basaka off for a few dozen seconds, if not defeat him. However, she never imagined that he would completely disable her with just one axe. If not for Ling Ufeixue's attack from behind at the critical moment, which distracted Basaka's attention, the next axe would have split her in half from head to toe. Ling Ufeixue directly reapplied a coating to Guan Yu and sent her flying into the air. However, in doing so, she herself was thrown into a bitter struggle. It was easy to get close to Basaka, but it was extremely difficult to get any distance. Bascara's attacks were nothing fancy, just pure brute force. The more he was injured, the more excited he became, and the more powerful his attacks became, as if he knew no fatigue. After just 3 exchanges, Lingu Feishua was thrown away, and her arm was broken in multiple places. The members of the Rose Squad were anxious, and hurriedly came to support her. They dared only attack from a distance. They used smoke bombs to disrupt Bascara's vision as much as possible. Although this could not harm Basaka, it was enough to anger him. Die, insects! I wanted to kill you slowly later. Now, you will die. He turned around and threw an axe upstream. The 2 beautiful female team members did not have time to say a word before their heads were chopped off. You, go quickly. Lingu Feishua let out a cry with all her strength. She had already realized the gap in their abilities. Sure enough, even if she had barely managed to use the Source Spirit to increase the strength of her supernatural abilities. But in the end, the huge gap in talent could not be made up for by sheer numbers. Lingu Feishua felt a bitter sense of loss. If she had not been so greedy and wanted to obtain the giant Source Spirit, she would not have attracted this terrifying guy over. By now, perhaps the entire Rose Squad would be destroyed at the hands of the other party. The end of the world was a merciless world. If one did not have sufficient strength, one did not even have the right to breathe. She had already planned to inject herself with Compound 5 and fight to the death with Basaka. Even if she did not survive, she would fight to leave a way out for her teammates. Just then, a cold voice suddenly came to her ears. Why aren't you leaving? What are you doing here? Basaka raised his battle axe high in the air, his face hideous as he prepared to slaughter the rest of the team. Suddenly, from the depths of the distant poisonous miasma, a huge ice blue light spread out. In the blink of an eye, it froze him in place. Basaka's body suddenly froze, and he felt as if a hole had been smashed open in his body, from which his strength was draining away. His body's supernatural powers suddenly erupted, dispersing this uncomfortable feeling. From the depths of the poisonous miasma, a woman wearing a dark red combat uniform walked out. An icy blue flame burned on her body, and streams of flame issued from her feet, restraining Basaka's movements. Lingu Feishua felt a surge of excitement when she saw her. She recognized the woman as one of the 4 spirits of the East Sea region, the Vermilion Bird. Lingu Feishua was a little puzzled as to why the powerful 4 spirits were appearing in an area far from the Misty Valley at this time. Shouldn't beings of this level be competing for the source of God? But regardless of these thoughts, her appearance here was the best news. When Basaka saw Vermilion Bird, the murderous intent in his eyes grew even stronger. He knew he had encountered an even more powerful opponent. However, berserkers were fearless. Vermilion Bird. It doesn't matter if you send a few people, I'm going to kill you all. He let out a terrifying roar. Vermilion Bird had already obtained intelligence from the command center and knew who the person in front of her was. An icy look appeared at the corner of her mouth. Hell's Lock. After their trip to Star Island, their hatred for each other had increased significantly. Without saying a word, she extended her right hand and clenched it tightly. A surging wave of ice and flame erupted from her body like a tsunami, sweeping towards Basaka. Basaka roared, the power of the Viking warrior spirit making his blood boil. Stamping his feet on the ground, he leapt forward and charged towards Vermilion Bird. Rumble! The waves of ice and flame engulfed Basaka in the air. He swung his battle axe in an attempt to cleave through the waves, but no matter how fast he was, he could not stop the all-pervasive ice and flame. Soon, blue ice and flame was attached to his skin. As the antimatter of fire, the ice and flame would consume the energy of all matter when it burned, including the human body. In a sense, Vermilion Bird was like Zhang Yi, the father of melee mutants. No, he even restrained the existence of melee mutants even more than Zhang Yi. Because Zhang Yi preferred to defend passively, but Vermilion Bird's ice flame could actively launch fierce offensives. With just a touch, the power within Basaka's body began to rapidly drain away. He let out an angry roar, burning his Viking fighting spirit, and after landing, he raised his battle axe and swung it at Vermilion Bird. Vermilion Bird swung her flaming whip with her left hand, forming an impenetrable defense around her body. Using softness to overcome hardness, Basaka's battle axe was unpowered by the whip and sank deep into the ground. The blood in his pupils quickly turned clear. No! He could feel his burning blood begin to cool. The power in his body was being consumed by the cold flames surrounding him, like maggots devouring a foot bone. A berserker who valued strength above all else would have nothing left if he lost his strength. He waved his battle axe unwillingly, but it could not dispel the icy blue flames on his body at all. After absorbing his strength, these flames would become even more powerful. Vermilion Bird of the Ice Prison, once entangled by this power, was almost an unsolvable ending. So from the beginning, when he charged recklessly, the battle ended without suspense. Vermilion Bird looked at Basaka, who was struggling in pain amidst the ice flames, and thought of White Tiger, who had died fighting for himself. Her murderous intent in her eyes grew stronger and stronger. More raging flames spewed from her right hand, forming a huge firestorm hundreds of meters high above the ground, trapping Basaka in it and beginning a merciless plunder of life. This scene made Lingu Feishue and the members of the Rose Squad tremble with fear. Is this the power of someone truly blessed? Once again, this bitter feeling arose in Lingu Feishue's heart. The last time she felt this strongly was when she met Zhang Yi. Chapter 1035, The Pied Piper. The berserker was completely enveloped in Vermilion Bird's ice and flame. The extreme cold, a flame that could devour all energy, quickly drained every last bit of his energy. The Rose Squad was silent upon seeing this. They could not imagine that there was such a way to fight. A mutant with a 9,500-point supernatural ability index was simply and easily slaughtered. Basaka's voice slowly faded away as he finally fell to the ground, reduced to a skeleton. Vermilion Bird did not kill him. Even though at that moment she harbored a sea of hatred for the infernal chain, she did not forget her duty as a soldier. Capturing a member of the infernal chain alive was more valuable than killing him. Vermilion Bird walked over and used the long whip in her hand to bind him firmly, then injected him with Compound 3. Finally, she shackled his arms in one go. Lingu Feishue came over and sincerely thanked her. "Thank you, Captain Vermilion Bird." Vermilion Bird glanced up at her and gave a small smile. "It's not suitable for you to stay here anymore. It will get more and more dangerous in the future, so it's best if you leave with me." Lingu Feishue nodded. "That's what I was thinking." The entire Rose Squad had just narrowly escaped being wiped out by Basaka alone. She was not stupid and would not be foolish enough to continue to stay here and search for the source spirit. So the Lingu Squad called on all members and told them to set off immediately and leave this damned area. But before they left, something occurred to her. In fact, they already had some information about Totoro. It would be a pity to just leave. So after some thought, she made a decision. She sent all the information about Totoro to Zhang Yi. At least everyone was from the Jiangnan region, and Zhang Yi was strong enough to stay in this battlefield. If he could get that guy because of this, he would owe her a favor anyway. At this time, Zhang Yi was secretly and quietly waiting for the source of God to appear. In the process, it didn't matter how the others fought, he would just silently watch the show. At most, he would step in at a critical moment to pluck a fruit and save some lives. However, he was also completely unaware of what was going on inside the Misty Valley. But on this day, after a long absence, his communication device received a message. Zhang Yi was a little curious. He had already blocked the command center's communication channel. In other words, the only people who could contact him now must be people in the Jiangnan region. Who would contact him at this time? When he opened the message, he discovered that it was old friend Lingu Feishue passing on intelligence about the giant source sprites. After many days of investigation, they had basically figured out the movement patterns and trajectory of the Totoro. However, because they didn't think they were strong enough and didn't want to continue to risk their lives on the island, they handed over all the information to Zhang Yi. Giant source spirit? It doesn't look like one. Zhang Yi ran his fingers along his chin, and he was also very curious about that thing. Because according to the information obtained so far, it had shown powerful combat capabilities that the source spirits did not have, and it could even rival high-level mutants. Zhang Yi even suspected that it had evolved from a mutation of an island creature. However, it did have some kind of mysterious connection to the source of God. The source elves were very close to it. Now that we have the information, why don't we go find it? Zhang Yi said to Flower and Lele next to him. As long as he had a target in mind, it wasn't difficult for him to search for prey with a clear objective. He wasn't going to get involved in someone else's fight anyway, so he might as well kill some time with that thing. Maybe there would be a surprise. Flower shook the fur on his back and stretched out his claws to scratch at the blanket beneath his feet. Meow, going hunting again? Yes. When he was happy, the strength in his claws would unconsciously increase, and he would pull out several tufts of fur from the thing beneath his feet. Lele, who was underneath Flower, was in pain and showed his teeth in a face of grievance. Since joining Zhang Yi's gang, apart from being a search dog for Zhang Yi, he was also a mount for Flower. Flower would punch him whenever he felt like it, and he didn't dare to say anything back. Lele's internal monologue, "Ha, live it up, who can live up to you too? With those sharp claws, scratching my back all day, you're using me as a scratching board, aren't you? How dare you? This dog's life is so frustrating. Yes, I can't beat you, I'm inferior in front of you, but I haven't done less after arriving on the island. You're really bad, you're really bad." Even though she was full of grievances, Lele could only bury her nose in the snow and sulk alone. Zhang Yi and Spirit Guardian were watching nearby and both secretly laughed. But they also enjoyed watching the animals' little conflicts. If Lele really encountered danger, Flower would never hesitate to protect her. Zhang Yi confirmed the location provided by Linghu Feishue, which was very good, far away from the central area of Misty Valley. That meant there would be no powerful mutants nearby. Well, this idea happened to coincide with Linghu Feishue's. The difference was that for Zhang Yi, there were not many people on the entire island who qualified as powerful. And there was no one who could pose a threat to his life. So he immediately decided to go with a cat, a dog, and Spirit Guardian to take a look at what the mysterious Totoro was really all about. If it really was a large Totoro, he could choose to absorb it himself, or keep it for himself and take it back home for his family to use, as appropriate. The mobility of space ability mutants was just strong. After saying that he was going to go, after a little preparation, he arrived nearby in no time. Lele lay on the ground, snuffling with his big nose, and began to sniff out the scent of the source of God. With the help of Lele, it didn't take long for Zhang Yi to confirm the location of the large Totoro. It was an abandoned valley. The only benefit of the poisonous miasma was that it had preserved the appearance of the tree base. The entire valley had turned an inky green color, filled with a dead air and a miasma. Zhang Yi activated the Two Realms Junction to block out all the breaths of himself and the others. He walked slowly forward and faintly heard a melodious tune in the air. It is said that the big guy can play the flute? How amazing! Zhang Yi became more and more curious. He walked step by step forward, being careful not to be discovered. After passing through the layers of mist, he finally saw the true form of the big Totoro. It was indeed as cute as the intelligence said, and its body shape was very similar to the big Totoro in the animation. Except that its head was more like a reindeer, with large and luxuriant antlers. It sat on a dead tree, its eyes closed, lost in the world of music. And Zhang Yi, thanks to the cover of Two Realms Junction, didn't make it aware of his presence.